The head of a leading polling company says Ontario voters don't seem particularly excited about their choices, with the provincial election only one day away. Polls suggest that the Progressive Conservatives are poised to win a second majority government, and that neither the NDP nor the Liberals have pulled away enough to become the clear second-place challenger. Sachi Curl, the president of the Angus Reid Institute, says recent polling by her firm found that PC leader Doug Ford is the top choice for premier, but with only 35% support. This while NDP leader Andrea Horwath is statistically tied around 20% with not sure. Ms. Curl mentioned that half of voters in Ontario are casting ballots to keep a party they don't like out of power rather than for a party they want to see win. Well, with us now to discuss the Ontario provincial election is Dr. Lydia Miljan, political science professor at the University of Windsor. Doctor, welcome back to Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
So some very underwhelming polls here. How are you reacting to these polls?
Well, nothing has changed during this campaign or even before. For the last, I'd say during the entire pandemic, it looked like the Progressive Conservatives led under Doug Ford had the support of Ontarians. And, usually we expect something to change during election campaign, some event, but nothing's happened. This is sort of a nothing campaign and nothing's changed.
And it seems that the public is also reacting in that way. It seems that they're not very impressed. So what do we know so far about the public response to this election so far?
I just don't think there's a lot of response. I mean, people are still saying that they're following it, but I don't think it's changed anybody's minds. And I think in part it's because, I don't think that the Progressive Conservatives under Doug Ford really had a chance to activate their mandate. And typically, Canadians don't usually vote out a government after majority, at least after one term. I think they allowed them to have a second term. And really, you could say that Doug Ford really didn't get a chance to do his agenda simply because of the pandemic. The other thing is that he kind of pivoted during the pandemic to be much more kindler and gentler kind of progressive conservative leader. And that's made it very difficult for the opposition parties to really land any strong attacks against him.
And what about your perspective? What has been your overall impression of this race so far?
Kind of boring. I mean, I thought there'd be a lot more sparks during the campaign. I thought that the debate would have been a defining event, and it really didn't. I don't think it really changed anybody's points of view. It's an interesting election, much like the last one was interesting because it was sort of a change election. People were tired of 14 years of the Liberal government. And Doug Ford at that time ran a very controversial decision in that he didn't do media. He didn't do any mainstream media interviews, and he's done that again this time. He got away with it in 2018, I think, because it was a change election. But it's interesting that it's actually hasn't harmed him this time around. So by not answering questions of reporters, he's able to stay away from making any mistakes on the campaign trail, which is really what you want to do when you're the front runner.
Definitely. So can you give us a brief overview of each of the parties' campaign platforms and promises so far?
Well, there's a lot of promises. I mean, the Liberals have a 19-point pledge to deal with everything from, lowering people's price at paying for transit to canceling highway projects. The NDP is really focused on affordability as well, but also in terms of increasing the minimum wage. And for the Progressive Conservatives, essentially they haven't really released a platform. What they're running on is their last budget, which was an enormous budget, more funding for healthcare, more funding for education, and a number of different initiatives.
So I guess the bigger question here would be whether the concerns of Ontarians are being addressed in these platforms. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think what Ontarians have the same concerns as anyone else in the country in terms of affordability and sort of just the response to the COVID-19 pandemic and getting over that. Certainly healthcare is something that the province can do something about, but affordability is a much more difficult one. The province has nothing to do with interest rates. It has nothing to do with rising gas prices. And so I think that the top of mind issues for people really aren't issues that can be addressed by the government. And that's perhaps why there hasn't been as much enthusiasm or interest in this campaign.
All right, Dr. Lydia Miljan, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Nice speaking with you.